Hello everyone, welcome to our third video lecture for our Community Governance and Mobilization course. And for this video lecture, we'll be talking about the different principles and the phases of community organizing. So for this lecture, we'll discuss about the following. So first, we'll redefine community organizing. And particularly, we're going to look at it from Filipino-based sources. And then we'll talk about the principles of community organizing, and we're going to be describing who the community organizer is, what are the expected values and characteristics of a community organizer, and then we're going to be talking about the different phases of community organizing and what do we do in each phase. So the source for this is chapters 2 to 5 of the ZSL manual, and then the part 1 of community organizing process guidebook of the DILG. So in our previous discussions, we alluded to community organizing and how it's done, what its nature is, what are the different principles and the values embedded in doing community organizing, but we never really formally defined it yet. So we'll do that in this particular section of the lecture. So community organizing is a process. So while of course the goal of community organizing is towards the well-being and increased quality of life of the people in a given community, the outcome is as important as the process that we're doing that particular outcome. And we'll learn about the different ways that we perform community organizing and how it's different from the usual economic and linear ways that we try to envision what development is for a certain locality or community. And then it's important that in this process, it is the community that identifies the needs. So in short, you might have heard in your lifetime a lot of grassroots, participatory, and that is what it means. So it's important that in doing community organizing, there is the process that we allow the community members to identify what their needs are, what their priorities are, what are their objectives, what is the meaning of well-being and quality of life to them, what is a good life for them, and what are their what are the different resources that they already have and that they would need in order for them to be able to get to that objective or goal of having a better life or a well-being. And in that process of assisting them or facilitating their capacity to be able to identify those needs and objectives, we develop their confidence, their capacity to take action towards that particular objective of well-being, whatever well-being means for them. And in so doing, it extends and develops cooperative and collaborative attitudes and practices in the community. So this is very important because, again, organizing is not an individual effort. We need the collaboration of all of critical mass in the community to make it work. We need to organize. We need to make sure that the efforts that are being concerted are being are structured. There is a mechanism in place. There's a structure in place. And most of the time, many of the problems that the community faces and the solutions that they have is really more on making sure that structures and mobilizing mechanisms are in place, so that they'll be able to reach that particular goal. So in general, as an activity that contributes to nation building, the primary goal of community organizing is to abolish the differences among individuals. So again, many of the problems that are happening in the community is because individuals are not working in solidarity. The individuals do not have a common consensus of what their problems are. They do not know resources that they can tap, or if they know, they're not organized in terms of, or how we can mobilize all of the resources and the capacities that are available in a particular community. And then after abolishing those differences, we would like to develop a spirit of common interest, so that we can have a critical mass, we can build a collective. and sacrifice, and also participate collectively in community programs. So that's what we want to do: collective, participatory, grassroots, self-reliance. Now, those are the things that we would like to indicate. And organization of people towards empowerment, and then we'll talk about empowerment in a separate lecture, because empowerment, there's so many notions about it. So we'll talk about what community empowerment means, what it entails, how do we know a certain community is empowered, how do we know a certain group or individual is empowered, and then how do we do well-being promotion, health promotion, career promotion, livelihood promotion, and how do this how are these integrated with one another, and then how does it all support the vision of what progress means for a particular community. So that's particularly our goal when we do community organizing, from a nation building standpoint. So what are the different characteristics that we have to understand when we do community organizing, and how is it different from a private sector that's profit driven? So because they're both organizational development. So what is the difference of developing an organization in the community towards a particular goal of well-being and increased quality of life versus a corporate or a private sector organization towards a profit? And one very important is that it's demand responsive, meaning the things that we do in the community is based on the demands of the community. When we say demands, it doesn't mean that this is something that they articulate as their demands. Ito kailangan namin. It's not necessarily that. But like what do their situation demand? Sometimes what they demand is not necessarily something that they're already conscious about. Sometimes this has to be put into consciousness. Now, there are two types of needs, that come to mind. So the first need is their practical needs. When we say practical needs, these are needs that are related to everyday survival. So they need food, they need water, they need housing, they need clothes, they need shelter. So those are practical needs. And then we also have strategic needs. So what are strategic needs? So strategic needs are those that will help them be more empowered. So this entails, one, capacitating them to be able to have increased control over their lives, and number two, to be able to break down the structures that cause their oppression. So two-pronged siya. So again, looking at the human rights-based approach, right? So we empower the rights claimants, and we also hold the duty bearers accountable. And the duty bearers that are accountable usually operate within structures that create injustice, like patriarchy, neoliberal capitalism, those, racism, ethnic biases, heterosexism, cisgenderism. So those are the structures wherein sometimes those are the injustices where duty bearers might lean upon when they act towards the people that they're supposed to serve, and that's the reason why we see injustices. And the issue and in fulfilling strategic needs of people, we need to be able to conscientize them that these are the injustices that you're experiencing, and capacitate you in order to advocate for yourself, and at the same time advocate towards holding them accountable and trying to make aware, to surface these issues of structural violence and structural injustices in our society, particularly the ones that are pressing on a particular community. And so it's not supply driven. And so there's always that argument that when you do feeding program, when you do dole-outs, so community organizing is not dole-outs, it's not charity, it's not you going to a community and because ikaw ay magpapakain ka lang, magbibigay ka lang ng gifts, magbibigay ka lang ng used clothes. While that is important in meeting practical needs, I'm not saying that giving charity is not good for communities. I feel like it's also needed. It's also needed because people have practical needs. Kapag when they are hungry, you need to feed them because they cannot be they cannot be capacitated if they cannot eat. So they have to be fed. Either you provide them with ingredients to cook the food, or if they are not really able, then they receive food. But of course, at the same time, while providing them with practical needs, you have to also, meet their strategic needs. Strategic needs meaning you have to capacitate them, no? About, you are receiving food, you're receiving stipend, no? For example, the 4 Ps. But at the same time, you have to be capacitated. We have to be moving you towards a, a place of helplessness to, to empowerment. And so you have to make persons and groups and communities to work towards that empowerment, not only just, meeting the practical needs of people. So it's not supply driven, it's not charity, it's not dole outs. It's very holistic, and even if even if you're doing niche programs, like for example, I know people who are fashion designers or clothing technologists who do social enterprise, and they help people, by providing them with livelihoods by using what they know about fashion and knowledge. It's fine, no? It's a little bit supply driven because that is what the organizer can do. But at the same time, the organizer, while ang niche niya is particularly, fashion or clothing, and then they do livelihoods in relation to that, the organizer knows the larger structures that will affect, why do they need to have extra livelihood in the first place? Why do they need to have a community organizer present in their particular needs in the first place? So it's very important na holistic yung approach mo, even if you have particular interventions that you're doing. Like for example, in our case, when I was still doing community health nursing with my students, of course, most of my students, we can only do mostly public health. Although that already addresses so many things, in the community in relation to, what are the diseases that are rampant in a particular community, what are the risks that they have, both for infectious and non-infectious diseases. But we cannot just close our eyes from other issues that are present, like poverty, like corruption. Although of course we won't have direct, but we are sensitive to that corruption, injustices, rampant, environmental concerns. So these are all things that are interwebbed in our issues in relation to health. So it's holistic, it's integrated, and it's process oriented, meaning we are getting the outcomes. People are receiving their needs, but at the same time, are they being empowered? Are we following the particular phases that are required in this process? So that's very important. And sobrang importante when we do community organizing is that whatever outcome that we come out, and the outcomes, whether that's tangible or non-tangible that comes out with the programs that we're making, there's community ownership. Ibig sabihin, like, that's the reason why we capacitate or we facilitate the community in terms of identification of needs, objectives, and solutions, because we want them to own that. And because if they own the process, if they participate in the process, then they will be the sustenance of the process, the sustainability of the process is better. Right? So there has to be community ownership, and this is a very important value, a very important principle that we have to, to increase. It's not about the community organizer. That's why I really hate, kaya nga we hate yung. Of course, humility is a good, humility is a good value, but at the same time, we want them to be able to, itong project na to, sila to. It's not about you. You're just there to facilitate, So yun siya, very important yun. And then community organizing looks at resources that are indigenous, that are part of the culture, part of the local, accessible, those that are affordable. You don't need to. Sometimes the solutions are within the natural and the social environment of the community, and you just have to capacitate the community members for them to be able to be creative and innovative, so that they'll be able to to look at solutions that are within their reach. Like for example, let's talk about accessible issues. Like for example, let's pull together, people. So for example, there's an issue in terms of high blood in the community. So maraming may high blood, hypertension. So a very frugal innovation is that you may not have resources for to have doctors, and nurses, visit visit the community, from time to time. But what you can do is probably train one person for every street and provide them with a blood pressure apparatus, and then you train one person per street for to take blood pressure, to assess blood pressure, so that within that street, that particular person is the go-to person just in case somebody wants their blood pressure assessed. So that's looking at resources that are already within your reach. So you don't really have, because blood pressure monitoring doesn't have to be done by a nurse or a health professional. It could be done by someone who is capable. So you capacitate the people within the community so that blood pressures of people can be assessed. Or like, for example, you want to do livelihood projects, you can look at natural resources that they already have. You don't have to import from other communities anymore if you want to do, like, for example, you want to do fashion, you want to do fashion and food technology as a part of the programs that you want to create. Then you probably look at textile, garment, and accessories that you can create based on the natural resources, but at the same time not exploiting the natural resources too much. So those kinds of things. So it has to be technically feasible, right? So, and it's committed to leadership and good governance. Leadership within the community, good governance means it follows a democratic process. It's collaborative. It emphasizes on solidarity, participation. Very important yun. There's a synergy among all of the partners that are being involved in the community. If we want to tap private, civil society, and government sector representative. And very important, it has to be gender sensitive. It has to be gender mainstream. There's mindful tayo that gender and sexual minorities, women, gender and sexual minorities are being put in the discussion tables, that their practical and their specific gender practical and strategic gender needs are also being met as we do this, So we have to be very kasi we do know that in the current state of our world, where in a patriarchal world, we know that women and girls and women are already in higher disadvantage. So they have to be part of conversations. They have to be part of programming. That's what we call gender mainstreaming. So those are the different characteristics of community organizing. You may have heard of these things before, so I'm just reiterating these things to you, giving some examples and illustrations. So, additional principles of community organizing. 1, community organizing involves consciousness raising through experiential learning. So, consciousness raising mostly should happen for people who are in the state of oppression. So we know what false consciousness is, that they feel like, helpless, that there's learned helplessness, that these are the things this is something that is already their destiny. They have internalized discrimination or internalized stigma towards their own oppression. And our goal, a part of our strategic needs, addressing their strategic needs, is to be able to conscientize them, that their current state is not only of their fault. Of course, we do not absolve them of their agency, but we have to make them understand that, it's based on your motivations and capacities and your agency, but at the same time, the state has to be doing something, to improve your well-being. It's part of our constitution. It's part of the instruments that we have signed, the human rights instruments that we have signed with the United Nations. We have signed so many instruments, and therefore, the state should have committed, and given you structures and social environments, macro systems that are supposed to help you raise. And so we conscientize them, and that's part of our advocacy, and it's also very important that experiential learning is there. Next, it's community organizing is participatory. So I've been explaining this. No, it's solid. It's based on solidarity, collective democracy, democratic decision making. It's also mass based, meaning masa, nagbabash sa masa. Sometimes you will find mixed communities in terms of socioeconomic background, right? For example, in the community that I have accessed, for example, in Cavite City, the fisher folk communities, the ones that are in the reclaimed area are the ones that are poor. But, you know, in the same barangay, you also have people na pamilya ng OFW na nagpatayo ng matataas na mga bahay, which is also part of the community. Our priority in terms of collective action really is, and mobilization is those who are poor, no? So yon. And then community organizing is based on democratic leadership. I told this already, and it's group centered and not leader oriented. And also the leader is not you. That's the community organizer. You are not the leader. It's not about you. Alright? So it's very important that I repeat that. No, the community organizer, while you have an important role, but whatever the output is, whatever the process is, it's never ever about you. It's about the community that you are organizing and mobilizing, you know. So there. And so according to our Philippine-based literature, there are just two. So we discussed about many varieties and approaches in the last video, but you know, another way to categorize those approaches is two ways. The one is it's issue-based, meaning, for example, just coming to the community, you're dealing with environmental issues, no? So yon, may ganon. And then meron din naman na socio-economic or project-based approach, wherein yon, place-based approach, no, of organizing. Like, we go to the community, we do not really have a particular goal in mind. There's no development goal in mind, no, but it's really, you know, overall looking at the community situation. The other one is, yeah, we're looking at the community situation, but the seed funding that we received really would compel us to, you know, do specific environmental work, no, or we just want to make sure that you have wash. Wash is water and hygiene. What's S? Sanitation. Water, sanitation, hygiene. I think that's what we mean, no? So safe water accessibility and sanitation and hygiene. And that's definitely what we need in the fisher folk community that we went to. So for example, that's what you are going to there. But it doesn't mean that you're blind. Like I said, no, even if you have a niche or if there's a developmental goal that your seed funder has provided you, it doesn't mean that you're blind to the other oppressive structures, no? You always have to enter the room. You have a focal developmental goal in mind, but it doesn't mean that it's detached from the other sustainable development goals, no? They're all integrated, you know? So yeah, issue-based approach, you know, or a socio-economic, so ibig sabihin project-based, or you're there, place-based approach. Yeah. And now we'll talk about the different phases of the community organizing process. When you go from one book to the next, iba-iba yung pangalan nila. Ano, iba ang pangalan namin ito for the nursing, no? So, but I'm teaching you coming from the community organizing guidebooks that are given by the government and civil society organization. And according to those outputs, no, to those guidelines, no, we have 4 phases. We have the preparatory phase, the organization building phase, the consolidation or strengthening and sustainability phase, and we have the network pull out, expansion, and follow through. We'll go through this one by one. So in short, these are the phases that, you know, in order for you to have a full sense of what community organizing is, it has to follow all of this work. So it means na, kaya nga, no, hindi tayo makakagawa talaga ng full community organizing experience in our class because this takes years, no? Usually the number of years is 3 to 5, no? So this one is a middle, no, a mid-term, and this one is a full term for community organizing. So it really takes some time for you to organize people because behavior change, you know, outcomes, well-being is not that. And even at 5 years, you will not be able to see the impact of your programs or your projects immediately, especially if these are social interventions. So Yeah. So, pumunta ka sa community, nag-gift giving ka, you go to the community, you taught them about livelihood, you went to the community, you taught them about longganisa cooking and how to set up your karinderya. You went to the community once and then you did bookkeeping, you taught them about bookkeeping. You went to the community once and then you did fundraising. You went to the community once and you did feeding programs. When you do, just go do, go to the community once, visit them, do some charity work. That's not community organizing. Community organizing is not a cross-sectional thing, no, in a research perspective. It's a longitudinal thing. You develop a relationship with the community, a relationship that fosters solidarity, participation, empowerment sa inyong community. So in the preparatory phase, in other books they call it the pre-entry phase. No? So what we do here is we, of course, especially if there's no target community yet, it begins with choosing which community, and then there are many considerations in choosing the community. Of course, we do not go to Forbes. we do not go to a posh or a middle income community. We go to a community that's usually experiencing, different types of poverty. Either that's income poverty, or that's food poverty, or that's poverty related to environmental dangers and environmental security risks, etc. And if for people who are trained in humanitarian work, in conflict work, and peace work, then we can also go there. So it's based also in terms of what you are trained to do, in terms of the choosing. But basically we look at people, we look at communities wherein there's a bigger population that is experiencing developmental issues, and would need developmental intervention or social intervention. So that's the first choosing. But sometimes when you are working in the development practice, sometimes it is the development organization or the civil society organizations have already chosen the community for you. So what you need to do is to do institutional preparation and linkaging. So, syempre, magbisita ka sa barangay captain, you go to the leaders of the community, the political leaders of the community, and establish memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement, so that site selection and validation. Sometimes you only just read documentation. So you plan initial visits, and then I put an asterisk here, because sometimes this is within the pre-organizing phase, but sometimes it's also in the preparatory phase. It's based on what type of development practitioner you are, or what part of the development process you are working on. But for example, in my practice, baseline community data collection, like what we do door to door, we assess people door to door. This is something that we do in the pre-organizing phase, not really in the preparatory phase, But sometimes, especially if you are the project leader, you have project assistants working for you, then this could be a part of the preparatory phase. Before you enter, you have people already doing enumeration for you, or you may have the data already part in the census and the registry. So, and also very important yung spot mapping, meaning you make a map, before when I was a younger student, in college, we didn't have the geo tagging applications that we have in this in this era. And during that time when we do spot mapping, really draw a map, and then we put legends, nasaan yung hospital, where are the houses, where are the streets, we name the streets, and then we color code where is the barangay health center, where is the plaza where the people congregate, where are the cafeteria, or where the canteens or the eateries, karinderya, where do you find the hospital, if there's a hospital, where's the school. So we indicate those. Where's the barangay hall, so we indicate those in the spot mapping, but now it's kind of easier because you have geomapping tools, so you can just overlay what's, you can find this in Fivox or DOST has these maps already, and sometimes those maps already tell you the terrain, and then you just have to, and then you have Google Maps, of course, and you already can visualize yung mga streets. You just have to update because later on the spot map will become more, you can create different types of spot maps. So this spot map is particularly for tsunami. So where do people go, or where do people evacuate when there's a tsunami? Where do people evacuate when there's fire? Where do people evacuate when there's flash floods? Where do people evacuate? So that's a disaster lens. Or like for example, if you're already organizing, that spot map could be saan nakatira, where do we find the potential core group leaders? So we can use that, no? Or where do we find potential people who could be the blood pressure takers? Yan. Where do we find senior citizens? So we can already code that in the spot map. So eventually that spot map will be a spatial or a geographical cue for you to be able to give more rights in the community. But again, in my case, it's up to, pinag-aagawan tong particular step na to, whether this is preparatory phase or the next phase, which is the pre-organizing phase. Okay, so the next phase is the organizational phase that is composed of two things, or two sub-phases, and the first one is the pre-organizational formation, or that's the entry phase, so this is where we now enter the barangay or the community and we integrate. So integration is so many things. You might have heard of ethnography. So imagine doing something very similar to ethnography. So for example, in my case, when I was a younger student, which we rarely do now, in community organizing, so we do, in community organizing for students, because of security issue. But during my time, we would be living in foster homes, so there would be a family that would adopt us, and we would sleep with the family, we would do the chores with the family, and then we would cook for the family would cook for us, paunahan na lang kung sino magluluto, we would clean the house, they would offer us their bed, and then kung anong i-offer nila sa inyo, you accept, and then makipagkwentuhan, and my classmates would, makipag-video game, makipagpatintero with the children, and then kung saan nagko-conglomerate yung mga nanay, makimarites ka, if of course, syempre may limitations, for adults, adult development workers, syempre kung may inuman, we can join the inuman, although I'm not a manginginom, we can join those, basta again, of course, safety issues, security issues. But in general, you have to build a rapport with the community. They have kailangan, eventually they identify you as the community organizer, But at the end of the day, in the process, of integrating with the community, dapat hindi ka na iba sa kanila. You should have already integrated yourself, that they don't see you as a different person or an outsider in the community. Prior to that, you would also probably need what we call a community assembly. A community assembly is just, inviting, asking permission from the barangay captain, can we schedule a community assembly, and then our team, the team of organizers, will just be there and introduce themselves and let themselves be known. Andito po kami, nakatira po ako kay Aling Nena, that's where I'm going to sleep, they're going to be my foster family, so, and then you're going to just give your goals with them. And then again, kasi kapag marites ka sa kanila, you're gonna be, joining informal conversations, because you need to know later on, that will help you in terms of pinpointing who are the potential members of your core group, who is going to be the potential leaders. But at the same time, during the pre-organizational phase, you can also be collecting the data. In our case, in my practice, we really do door-to-door censusing, ilan kayo sa house, how many are in the household, we enter the houses, of course, with their consent, and then we check their bathrooms, what type of latrines, what type of toilet do they have, sanitation, of course, but you have to be very respectful, when you're asking about very sensitive stuff, those kinds of things. You ask them about their transportation, etc. And then also you have to go around the community. You have to look at possible danger zones. You have to look at construction of houses. You look at risky areas. You talk about environmental issues that are found in that particular community. So you're really going to kind of really scour data, information formally through the survey, through focus group discussions, and also informally by doing chismis, makipag-inuman, makipag-videoke, makipaglaro sa mga bata, So that's your work, So two-prong, you are integrating with the community, but at the same time you're getting as much data as you need, to inform you about how you're going to help the community in terms of capacitating them. And that's very important, when you do assessment, it has to be participatory, So eventually, yung door-to-door mo, may kasama kang community, you are together with a community person, So you're going to teach them about, that this is how we conduct FGDs, etc. I will talk about community participatory research in a separate lecture, so I won't be getting to that in a very specific, in detail in this lecture, Next, the second phase is the organizational phase. So this is where we now form the organization. Again, as I mentioned, many of the social interventions or many of the solutions for their problems is really in creating a structure of people working collectively and in solidarity with each other in order for them to meet their strategic and their practical needs. Right? Making the mechanisms more formalized, making it democratic, and capacitating them in trying to develop that organization, to develop a system, in terms of trying to help them in terms of gaining what they need to gain, whether that's something as tangible as we need resources or something as, we need policies to protect us, we need policies to ensure that the needs that we have is we receive it, And so, in the process of collecting data, in the process of integration, you are already asking, elder, sino ba? Who do you trust in this community? If you have a problem, where do you go? Kung may problema ka ate, saan ka pumupunta? And then you try to look at, you do a social networking or an echo mapping in the community, and you try to find sino ba sa kanila? Sino yung common na pinupuntahan ng mga tao pag may problema sila? And that means that these are persons who is trusted by the community. And again, these people does not have, again, the leaderships that we spot are not the barangay. Kagawad, the council, is not that they should not have any political assignments. That's very important, So again, grassroots, So we try to investigate, informally and formally, who are the people that are trusted by the community. So we ask, the usual question to ask is, if you have a problem, to whom do you go? Sino mo pinupuntahan niya if you have a problem? And then you try to kind of map. Parang pitong households na natanungan ko, this particular person yung pinupuntahan nila, may potential siya to be the voice, to be an advocate, to be a leader in the community, to be a part of the core group. And then we develop them. So we form them as a core group, we develop them, we capacitate them, and then of course form ad hoc committees based on the problems that are identified by the communities themselves, And then we help them in formulation the action plan. Again, we just help them. We tell them, ito po yung parts ng action plan. It has to be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. There are tables, but you don't make it for them. You just teach them what are the parts of an action plan. You teach them what makes an action plan good, what are the different entities that they have to put in an action plan, but they should be the one to identify their objectives. You just guide them, Because we believe that the community is the best person, as the best source of knowledge for the social intervention. You just need to capacitate them. You just need to facilitate them. You just need to conscientize them, but you don't have to tell them, this is what you need to do. These are your problems. No, you gather the data, you show them the data that you gathered with them. No, so it's a self-reflective process. No? And then you have to eventually formalize the organizational structures and mechanisms from ad hoc committees to actual committees that have some form of influence. And of course, formalizing it means that you need to create some form of operational guidelines, step-by-step procedures that they need to follow to document their work. Right? So yon. Next is the consolidation phase, wherein we have already built the organizing structures, no, in the community, the structure of people, the core group, the ad hoc committees, and then we need to capacitate them. No, we need to capacitate them. We need to empower them through many ways. No, I will not be able to give all of the examples here, but there are many ways. But again, you capacitate them based on context. No, so that's why I cannot give specific examples. But capacitating them makes the bond of the core group stronger, gives more confidence and self-reliance on the people in that core group, in that particular organization. And then, of course, from an action plan that is usually short or mid-term, we will now ask them to create a vision, a mission. Now, what do they want to envision? Ano ba ang well-being? What do they want to achieve in 5 years, in 10 years? We interrogate them on that. No? We facilitate their brainstorming in relation to that. No? And then, if important, they obtain legal status. So ito na. No? Remember our discussions about, from becoming an individual to a quasi-group to an association, right? And then becoming to a formal organization. Becoming a formal organization increases their bargaining power, increases the legitimacy of their organization. So, mag-create na kayo ng bylaws in that organization. Right? What is the succession planning? Very important to, yung succession planning to sustain, kasi madalas after 5 years when the organizers leave, wala na, the community pilay na, hindi na matuloy yung mga programs na sinasimulan that's born out of the organizations. But if you have succession planning, you have capacitation, it's formalized, na SEC nyo siya, then the programs and the technical support that you provided them during the time that you were there as community organizer, masustain nila. Part the capacity building is also how do they access funds? How do they form proposals? How do they write letters? So many things that you can do in terms of capacitating them so that all of the programs that you have established during the 5 years that you have been there as an organizer, they'll be able to sustain even if you have already pulled out of the community. The last phase is the exit phase or the networking, pull out, and follow through phase. So this one is extending partnerships with other community organizations. So maybe there are other community organizations in a different barangay that they have shared struggles and shared programs, and they could capacitate each other so that they could have, a federation. Of barangays. Again, pagka mas organized at mas coordinated ang movements, if there is a singular vision, the bargaining capacity also increases. Right? So, increasing the critical mass. And then establishing formal linkages, mag-MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Agreement with government, private, and civil society organizations. So, kung anong na-build nila na legal they kind of increase their capacity as an organization by being able to access the resources that they can find in government, in private sectors, in civil society organization. And then, doing advocacy work from your end. Maybe you have realized while community organizing that there are larger local, regional, and national policies that need to be lobbied. You do it so that whatever na nasimulan in the particular grassroots community, may pagpatuloy and mas strengthen. So there you have it. So these are the different principles and phases of community organizing. Of course, I've explained them as vividly as I could, but of course, iba pa rin. It's a different thing when you've already experienced it on the ground. I wouldn't say that I have finished, really very successful community organizing projects, but I have experienced enough for me to be able to give you some vivid examples of how it's done. Right? So that's it for our video for this session.